Recording now. Thank you, Pat. Ethical Culture Leader Greg Bonin is the American Ethical Union's Director of Administration and Organizational Culture. He's also a candidate for ministerial fellowship with the Unitarian Universalist Association. Greg specializes in institutional and organizational facilitation, bringing a praxis grounded in embodiment, humanistic interdependence, and reflective inquiry as a method for lifelong formation. Greg is especially curious about queering practices that create spaces where transformative paradigms can emerge. And so it is now time for us to hear from Greg.
Thanks all, and thanks Anne for the warm welcome and the hospitality this weekend. And I'm gonna open my notes here. And Dupre and Barry for that wonderful music. Loved it, yeah, that was wonderful. My name is Greg Bonin. You're welcome to use all pronouns with me. Today's platform will be somewhat interactive. And if you're not used to that, or if this is something that you weren't expecting, I hope you'll participate as an experiment in something different. Inquiry and embodiment are two practices that inform my worldview, and I will be inviting you today, both explicitly and implicitly, into both practices in my talk. To start, I will invite you into a moment of body awareness. Know that everything today is an invitation. You know your body best, so only accept the invitations that are right for you, and feel free to modify the invitation in a way that feels comfortable for your body. Then we'll engage our embodied imaginations with an adaptation of works by my colleagues Kimberly Ann Carlson-Tomczyk and Gwen Matthews. If it helps to give yourself permission to become present, you can close your eyes or hold a soft gaze. Take a few full breaths. Inhale and exhale. Fill your lungs if that's comfortable for you. And with each breath, settle into your body a little more. Rest your back, rest your feet, and rest your arms. Let your seat hold your body, and let the floor hold your feet, or your wheels, or the nub of your cane. Feel the gravity of the earth holding you in place. Wiggle your toes as if they were roots. And if your body wants to wiggle something else's roots, you are invited to do that. Roots connect you to the earth, lending you strength. Gently sway in the wind, turning your body like a trunk of a tree, leaning this way and that, bending as the air pushes and pulls. What surrounds you may sway you, make you bend and feel unbalanced. Wiggle your toes. Know that your roots can hold you as you grow and learn. A tree is nourished by the soil and water. You are nourished by the food the earth grows and the water it provides. You are cared for and loved by many people. Breathe deeply. Breathe deeply. Still yourself. Know that your roots are strong. Wiggle your roots. Feel that each breath, every inhale, exhale, we are living, breathing, connected. We are the whole, complete, beautiful selves that we were born to be. Wiggle your roots. Feel that in your bones, in your muscles, in your heart and your blood. That is the extraordinary you. The you who was born for this time, this place, this moment. Wiggle your roots. Feel that? The struggle, the worry, the pain, the loss, the grief. It is still you. You are whole, complete, beautiful, extraordinary. Wiggle your roots. Feel that. And when you're ready, take 1 or 2 full breaths. Gently open your eyes and return to the room. Because what I believe comes from my body's stories, I want to tell you a little bit about myself and my humanism. My humanism is informed both by my ethical culture and my Unitarian Universalist traditions. Ethical culture is a religious, humanistic movement. I believe that both designations are important, that we claim both a religious identity and a humanistic identity. Unitarian Universalism is a liberal, pluralistic, religious movement that shares some characteristics with ethical culture. Like ethical culture, Unitarian Universalism does not demand we live according to one creed. Instead, principles and sources from pluralistic traditions, including humanism, serve as inspiration for living our best lives. So what is humanism? Philosopher and humanist Norman Richards says, there is no definitive set of beliefs called humanism. There are many humanisms. I think this is true, especially when we consider a lived humanism. And my humanism has 5 key beliefs. 1, this is the only life I have, and I am responsible for its condition. 2, all humans have the potential for both great good and great evil. 3, humans and human concerns are only one part of a vast, interdependent natural universe. 4, the universe is amoral, and I must commit to constructing moral value. And 5, life can have meaning with or without a god or gods, and I hold an agnosticism or skepticism towards supernatural claims. And another way of saying all of that is, we are all we've got. And in order for humanism, especially religious humanism, to offer a substantive orienting worldview today, the question it must answer is, what is going to keep me going at 3 in the morning when I'm wide awake and devastated? This morning, I'm going to tell you a little of my story, which is only one story of how one kind of humanism is lived. I grew up in southern New England. As a youth, I attended a Catholic elementary school and a New England Baptist church. In high school, I attended an unaffiliated, charismatic evangelical church, participated in mission trips, and prepared to attend an evangelical Christian Bible college. That last church taught their own exclusivist interpretation of their Bible. For me, this meant that the only right relationship I could have with folks outside the church was an active attempt to bring them into the exclusivity of the church. So I proselytized to my classmates for almost 4 years. And as you might imagine, that made me quite popular. In my last year of high school, as I started actually spending time with folks outside the church, I found that the church's teachings didn't align with my experiences. So I severed my ties with the church. This was a big decision at the time because the teachings and community of this church had provided me with a framework that oriented me to the universe and the people in it. It helped me make sense of the world. Their framework insisted that my existence relied upon an ultimate supernatural divinity according to a restrictive interpretation of Christianity. In other words, the only truth was God, capital G, and conservative evangelical Christianity. Faced with the evidence that, at the very least, this framework did not have room for the truths that were emerging for me, I abandoned that framework. Leaving that church meant that my whole understanding of the universe collapsed. So you might imagine that when I arrived at college, I had a few questions. I soon stumbled upon two philosophies, existentialism and phenomenology, that gave me some reasonable tools to begin exploring some of the more profound questions I was asking myself at the time. Existentialism's focus on human experience helped me reframe my values in a way that made sense to me. That is, the ability to live a life ethically without supernatural justification. Phenomenology suggested new ways for me to examine and make meaning from my experiences. Together, they provided me with an inward-looking and outward-seeking way to navigate relationships and interpret my experiences. Their emphasis on personal responsibility and social accountability rang true with how I understand myself to be connected and interconnected with nature and society. Although I didn't have language for it at the time, this was my gateway to humanism. And in my 30s, something fundamental shifted for me. I think of this period of my life as a dark night. And a dark night is more fully called a dark night of the soul and is used with religious or spiritual connotations. It refers to a period of significant doubt that can lead to questioning the certainties that shape our world. My understanding of the world was failing me, and I had to find new ways to move through it. A dark night is a primal deconstruction and reconstruction of how we understand ourselves, and it can feel mythic. Saturn returns is an astrological term that marks the time when the planet Saturn is in the same place that it was when I was born. That's about 29 years, the time it takes for Saturn to orbit the sun. So Saturn is just reeling around, getting all up in my face and demanding that I reckon with how I had lived in the world. Suffice to say, Saturn is not gentle. Even though I identify as atheistic today, these ideas continue to serve as rich metaphors for describing this period in my life. They resonate with me as descriptors because the dark night reflects my experience as a human body in the world. And Saturn returns literally marks the place in my lifetime that situates me within the cyclical rhythm of the universe. I loved philosophy because I loved playing with ideas and concepts, but during these visceral experiences, ideas weren't enough. I think if I had insisted on clinging, white-knuckled, pun intended, to my philosophies during that period of my life, they would have mired me in a brittle certainty that would have ultimately distanced me from life. I'm grateful that I did not. I began to relax my focus on concepts and begin applying philosophy to human activity. In other words, I shifted from a theory of humanism to a praxis of humanism. To live into this shift, I sought communities that could make space for the biggest questions that were emerging from my experience of being a body in this world. And if you're in conversation with me for more than a few minutes, you'll notice that I talk a lot about what it means to be a body. That's because I believe that our bodies are our whole human selves. Another way to say this is that our bodies are our soul or our spirit. Over the next 10 years, I participated in and worked in community groups that helped me live into some answers of the questions that I was asking. The most impactful of those groups offered a community movement and dance practice. This practice invited folks to express their body's stories through nonverbal, free-form, whole body movement while immersed in music. This practice quickly became important to me because I was having a singular, overwhelming, ineffable experience. And this was a space where I could set aside words and express my stories with my body. Throughout my life, music has consistently inspired awe and wonder, a way to feel connected to others and to the world. And dancing to music with other bodies in a shared space while expressing my Dark Night and Saturn Returns carried me into a place that felt transcendent. Being in a movement practice grounded me in my body in a way that playing with ideas never could. And I continued my practice even after leaving that community. Like my exploration of existentialism and phenomenology, body movement became a humanist practice for me. It's a visceral way of living into we are all we've got, embracing responsibility for the condition of my one life by co-constructing meaning and moral value within an interdependent community. Being connected to community is important to me because I believe that congregating is one way we actualize human interconnection within the natural universe. Congregating provides a rhythm that helps orient our days and marks the passage of time, inviting us to share witness of life's milestones, as y'all did this morning. Perhaps most importantly, congregating is a way for us to understand how our bodies are in relationship with one another, both personally and socially. And on that note, I want to take a moment and ask you to pause and just feel your body. And as you continue listening, take a few deep breaths at a pace that is comfortable for you and share your focus between your body and your listening. Around the time I turned 40, I began exploring ethical culture at the Ethical Humanist Society of Asheville in North Carolina. And a few years later, I began learning more about Unitarian Universalism while attending graduate school. Together, Unitarian Universalism and ethical culture offered me a humanistic framing for understanding our interdependence. And like my movement practice, both offer communities of practice where I can journey alongside folks who are also seeking to construct moral value with this only life we have. In my ongoing exploration of these traditions, I always return to curiosity and inquiry. Taking a cue for Rainier Maria Rilke, I try to love the questions. Lately, I've been asking two questions in particular. What kind of bodies and experiences does this space represent? And what bodies are invited to flourish here? And these questions connect me to my practice of queerness, which has been at the heart of my humanism for the past few years. My queerness asks the critical question, how can we flourish, as a way to contextualize how I myself might flourish? And if we understand humanism as we are all we've got, then this is the question. And if we can begin to answer this question, we might begin to know what is going to keep us going at 3 in the morning when we're wide awake and devastated. For me, some answers to that question reside in how I connect with natural beauty, how I situate myself within communities of practice, like ethical culture societies, and perhaps most importantly these days, learning how to access joy. One answer to the question of our survival and flourishing is that joy is not a frivolous luxury. Joy is necessary. I spent about a decade working and volunteering with local nonprofits in Asheville, North Carolina. These were service-oriented nonprofits that offered racism education, body movement as spiritual practice, and spiritual exploration for queer and gay men, among other things. What I learned from this work is that we are interdependent, that our inherent dignity and worth, the qualities of our human relations, our spiritual growth, our global community, are all held within our interdependence. I'm especially interested in human relationships as part of our interdependence. One of my favorite descriptions of human relationships comes from feminist and poet Adrienne Rich. She writes, "An honorable human relationship, that is, one in which two people have the right to use the word love, is a process, delicate, violent, often terrifying to both persons involved, a process of refining the truths they can tell each other. It is important to do this because it breaks down human self-delusion and isolation. It is important to do this because in doing so, we do justice to our own complexity. It is important to do this because we can count on so few people to go that hard way with us." For years, I looked to this kind of hard way as an ultimately meaningful description that comprised the whole work of human relationships. The hard way built a personal foundation for me to participate in collective resistance through relationship building. And it made this resistance worthwhile for me. The hard way moved me toward a solidarity and allyship that was grounded in embodiment, liberation, and justice. In short, the hard way was good work. As I continued working in different community resistance projects, I repeatedly found myself joyless, depleted, and sometimes devastated. Who wouldn't be depleted by a process that can be delicate, violent, and often terrifying to both persons involved, even when it leads to expansively rich and beautiful relationships? While Adrienne Rich's hard way accurately described the risk and vulnerability required to grow an honorable human relationship, it was missing a source of nourishment that could sustain such work. As I was searching for a source of nourishment, I started leaning into queerness. And my understanding of queerness, as you heard earlier today, comes from womanist author and queer ancestor Bell Hooks. She described queerness as being about the self that is at odds with everything around it, the self that has to invent and create and find a place to speak and to thrive and to live. Again, queer as being about the embodied self that is at odds with the systems of power around it, and inventing and creating and finding a place to speak and to thrive and to live. This is a queerness that asks not only what is needed to survive, but what is needed to flourish as a body in the world, our particular bodies, as we negotiate systems of violence, oppression, and exploitation. I remember being struck the first time I heard this during a particularly joyless period of devastation. Her description of queerness implied that thriving is necessary to continue resisting. She opened up the possibility that joy is not a frivolous luxury, but a necessity. Hooks' queerness connected to Adrienne Rich's hard way by acknowledging the reality that we are sometimes at odds with everything around us and insisting that we create new spaces to thrive, even in the face of overwhelming resistance to our dignity and worth. Joy is an act of resistance. This is the title of the poem by Black American poet Toi Derricotte that was read earlier. This is one in a series of poems entitled The Telecycle, Grieving the Death of Her Fish. That poem starts, "Why would a Black woman need a fish to love? Why did she need a flash of red, living, in the corner of her eye. In my personal reading of the poem, I hear Derricotte noticing, suddenly, a thriving and living amongst doubt and devastation. As she names it, I hear joy. It's not an exhilarating, ephemeral, or disconnected joy, like the joy we're sold in advertisements that promise happiness. It's a joy that surfaces from human fragility and propels the poet through the remainder of the poem. This kind of joy has an inextricable, direct relationship with experiences of devastation and terror. It's a joy that allows her to endure. In A Feminist Ethic of Risk, author Sharon Welch summarizes this direct relationship between joy and pain in her assertion that we cannot numb our pain at the degradation of life without also numbing our joy at its abundance. And that is worth repeating. We cannot numb our pain at the degradation of life without also numbing our joy at its abundance. There's a kind of joy that's described by all of the women I've named this morning who have contributed to my own framework for endurance. I think of this joy as durable joy. And I believe that durable joy has a significant role in renewing our ability to resist residing in devastation and to renew ourselves. Toward the end of Derricotte's lament for her fish, Telly, there are a few lines where devastation and joy intermingle. Why did she need a fish, a red thorn, or among the thorns, that flower? What does her love have to do with 500 years of sorrow? Then joy, coming up like a small breath, a bubble. This is the place where durable joy resides. Durable joy embraces that we are both simply mourning the death of a fish, and also that we are connected to an expansive history that we cannot possibly hope to contain in any single moment. It connects us with something bigger than us, that is also wholly us. The invitation into durable joy is sometimes small and easy to overlook, like a small breath, a bubble, or a favorite song that makes you sing out loud, the effervescence of your friend's irrepressible smile, or the peaceful majesty of mountains on the distant horizon. For me, it was the Blue Ridge Mountains where I could wander when the world was just wrong. Knowing that their immense beauty existed in spite of my personal devastation connected me with something that was more than just myself. They were here before me, and they will be here after I'm gone. And that persistent, durable perspective lent me a sense of subtle joy. I invite you to take a moment right now and bring one of your own joys to mind. Maybe a song, or maybe a person who has journeyed alongside you, or something else deep in your bones, a joy you have already lived into. I'll pause a few moments as you bring it to mind. As you recall this joy, notice what your body does. Maybe you lightened or relaxed a little. Maybe you expanded just enough to make space for something more. I'm drawing attention to our bodies because durable joy emerges from our particular experience of being a body in this world. As bodies, we navigate systems of power that attempt to regulate our dignity and worth. And that regulation is often exploitative and oppressive. Part of my experience as a body navigating these systems includes that I am white proximate, male presenting, and mostly able-bodied, among other things. These markers have a material impact on how my body interacts with systems that shape our lives. How my body is marked places me more or less proximate to power within these systems. And my belief in our interdependence compels me to acknowledge this. Durable joy can sustain us in the lifelong, personal, and collective work of resisting detrimental systems of power. These systems will try to reduce us and delude us into believing that our dignity is not worth our resistance. They will try to isolate us, and we must refuse to be isolated. We must find ways to risk moving beyond our isolation and moving toward personal and collective joy. And I want to be crystal clear. The sources for durable joy that come from our experiences as bodies in this world are legitimate. They are legitimate because they are grounded in our inherent worth, which cannot be reduced. When I say that joy is an act of resistance, I am saying that durable joy resists the regulation of our dignity and worth by insisting that these are inherent and irreducible qualities of our person and of every person. Durable joy can hold us when we experience the desolation of our human fragility, and when we are transcendentally ecstatic, and every experience in between. It's the kind of joy that can acknowledge 500 years of sorrow and still call us back into life. In closing, I want to reiterate that my understanding of humanism is not definitive. It is only what I've found useful thus far. My humanism comes from my particular story, and it's only one story. I hope you will hear my story as an invitation to consider your own story about being a body in the world and how humanism might inform your understanding of your story and your sources for joy. Sometimes life can feel like endless resistance. To endure, we must know and remember our sources for durable joy. So I ask you this morning, where does your joy come from? What are your sources for durable joy? Who and what can you call on in your moment of need when your own acts of resistance have depleted you? What will keep you going at 3 a.m. when you're wide awake and devastated? Maybe your joy comes from the intimacy of relationships, the beauty of nature, or the wonder and ecstasy of artistic expression. Maybe it comes from something small that only your own body remembers. Whether you're in a peaceful place or a place of desolation, I invite you to notice one joy that brings your spirit reprieve. Lean into that. Bring yourself close to that precious source. Hold on to it as you invent and create and find a place to speak and to thrive and to live. Thank you for hearing me this morning.
Okay. Pat, you can stop the recording. And we have a second piece